What happens when one of music's most legendary and notoriously private figures sits down with one of daytime television's most outspoken hosts? You get an interview that nobody saw coming and an ending that absolutely nobody expected. Bob Dylan, the voice of a generation, the poet laureate of rock and roll, found himself in the hot seat on The View. And what started as a simple conversation about his new album quickly turned into one of the most uncomfortable moments in daytime television history. Before we get into exactly what went down, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me what you think about all of this. Because trust me, you're going to have opinions. So there's Bob Dylan sitting on that iconic couch wearing his signature sunglasses indoors, his presence almost ghost-like against the bright studio lights. The audience gave him a standing ovation when he walked out because this is Bob Dylan we're talking about. The man rarely does interviews anymore, let alone daytime talk shows. Joy Behar is sitting across from him with that look in her eyes. You know, the one where you can tell she's got questions locked and loaded. Joy starts off friendly enough. She says, "Bob, it's such an honor to have you here. You've been making music for over 6 decades. What keeps you going?" Dylan, in his trademark raspy voice, barely audible at first, says, "I don't know if it's about keeping going. It's just what I do, like breathing. You don't think about breathing. You just do it." Joy laughs, nods. The audience claps politely. She says, "That's beautiful. That's really beautiful. But you've always been known for your protest songs, your political stance back in the 60s. Do you feel like music today has that same power to change things?" And this is where you can see Dylan shift a little in his seat. He tilts his head slightly, and there's this pause, this long pause that makes everyone uncomfortable. He finally says, "I never thought of my songs as protest songs. Other people called them that. I was just writing what I saw, what I felt. If people want to protest, they'll protest. Songs don't change anything. People do." Joy leans forward now, and you can tell she's not satisfied with that answer. She says, "But Bob, come on. Blowing in the wind. The times they are changing. Those songs inspired millions of people to stand up against injustice. You can't tell me you didn't know what you were doing." Dylan removes his sunglasses for the first time, and his eyes are tired, but there's something sharp in them. He says, "I knew what I was doing. I was writing songs. What people did with them after that, that's on them. I'm not a politician. I'm not a preacher. I'm just a musician." Joy's smile tightens. She says, "So, you're saying you have no responsibility for the impact of your work? That seems a little convenient, don't you think?" The audience goes quiet. You can feel the temperature in the room change. Dylan stares at her for a moment, then says, "I'm saying I don't control how people interpret my work. Never have, never will. If you want someone to tell you how to think, go watch the news." Oh, you can see Joy's eyes flash at that one. She says, "Well, I am the news, Bob. And I'm just trying to understand how someone who wrote some of the most politically charged music of the 20th century can sit here and act like he was just what? Doodling in a notebook." Dylan leans back, crosses his arms. He says, "I wasn't doodling. I was surviving. There's a difference. You think I had some grand plan. I was a kid with a guitar trying to make sense of a world that didn't make sense. Still doesn't." Joy doesn't let it go. She says, "But you had a platform. You had influence. You still do. Don't you think artists have a duty to use that influence for good?" Dylan's jaw tightens. He says, "Who decides what good is? You, the network, the government. I've seen enough people claim they know what's good to know that nobody really does. Everyone's just guessing." Now, Whoopi Goldberg jumps in, trying to diffuse things a little. She says, "Bob, I think what Joy is trying to say is that your music meant something to a lot of people during a really difficult time in this country. That has to mean something to you." Dylan looks at Whoopi and his face softens just a bit. He says, "Of course it means something, but meaning is personal. What my songs meant to you might be different from what they meant to the person sitting next to you. I can't own that. I don't want to own that." Joy interrupts. She can't help herself. She says, "So, you're basically saying you take no ownership of your legacy? That's absurd, Bob. You can't just create something powerful and then wash your hands of it." Dylan's voice gets quieter, which somehow makes it more intense. He says, "I'm not washing my hands of anything. I'm just saying I don't spend my time thinking about legacy. I'm still here, still making music. Legacy is what people talk about when you're dead." Joy shoots back immediately. She says, "Well, maybe if you cared a little more about what your music stands for today, we wouldn't be in the mess we're in right now." And there it is. The line has been crossed. Dylan sits up straight, looks directly at Joy, and says, "What mess are you talking about? The mess that you people on TV keep talking about in circles every single day? You think if I wrote another protest song tomorrow, it would fix anything? It wouldn't. You know why? Because the problem isn't the music. It's the people who would rather talk about the music than actually do something." The audience gasps. Sunny Hostin looks uncomfortable. Sarah Haynes is frozen. Alyssa Farah Griffin looks like she wants to say something, but doesn't know where to start. Joy's face goes red. She says, "Excuse me. We're trying to inform people. We're trying to have important conversations about what's happening in this country. What are you doing besides hiding behind cryptic lyrics and refusing to take a stand on anything?" Dylan doesn't raise his voice, but his words cut deep. He says, "I take a stand every time I write a song. Every time I get on stage. The difference is I don't need a camera and an audience clapping for me to feel like I've done something meaningful. I just do it." Joy slams her hand on the table, not hard, but enough to make a point. She says, "That is so typical. You artists, you think you're above it all, like you're too pure to get involved in the real world. Meanwhile, the rest of us are down here in the trenches, trying to make a difference." Dylan tilts his head, almost amused now. He says, "The trenches? You're on a talk show. You sit in a comfortable chair. You read off a teleprompter. You go home to a nice apartment. Don't talk to me about trenches. I've been on the road for 60 years playing dive bars and arenas, seeing this country up close, not through a television screen. I've seen the trenches. This isn't it." Whoopi tries again. She says, Okay, let's bring it down a notch here. "Bob, I think we're all just trying to understand where you stand on things today. The world is different now than it was in the 60s. Do you think your music still has relevance?" Dylan looks at her, and you can see he's tired of this line of questioning. He says, "I don't think about relevance. That's a word people use when they want to sell something. My music exists. If people connect with it, great. If they don't, that's fine too. I'm not here to be relevant. I'm here to be honest." Joy jumps back in because she can't let it go. She says, "Honest? You've been dodging every question we've asked you. How is that honest?" Dylan's eyes narrow. He says, "I've answered every question. You just don't like the answers. There's a difference. You want me to say something quotable, something you can clip and put on social media. I'm not going to do that. I'm not here to perform for you." Joy laughs, but it's not a friendly laugh. She says, "You're literally on a television show, Bob. This is a performance. Everything you do is a performance. The sunglasses, the mysterious act, the whole Bob Dylan mystique. It's all calculated." Dylan stands up, not aggressively, but definitively. He says, "If you think I'm calculating anything, you haven't been paying attention. I wear sunglasses because the lights hurt my eyes. I don't give straight answers because most questions don't have straight answers. And I don't play games because I'm too old and too tired for that nonsense." The studio goes dead silent. You can hear the camera still rolling, but nobody knows what to say. Joy stands up too, facing him across the table. She says, "So what? You're just going to walk out? You're going to prove my point that you can't handle a real conversation." Dylan puts his sunglasses back on. He says, "I've had plenty of real conversations in my life. This isn't one of them. This is a performance, like you said, and I'm done performing." Sunny Holston finally speaks up. She says, "Bob, please sit down. Let's talk about your new album. That's why you're here, right? Let's focus on the music." Dylan looks at her, and for a second it seems like he might sit back down. He says, "The music speaks for itself. It always has. I don't need to explain it. I don't need to justify it. And I certainly don't need to defend it on national television." Joy isn't backing down. She says, "You know what your problem is, Bob? You think you're above accountability. You think because you wrote some important songs 50 years ago, you can just coast on that forever and never have to answer for anything." Dylan's voice drops to almost a whisper, but the microphone picks it up perfectly. He says, "Accountability. What do I need to be accountable for? I've never hurt anyone. I've never lied to anyone. I've made music. I've lived my life. And I've tried to be decent. If that's not enough for you, then nothing ever will be." Joy fires back. She says, "It's not about being decent. It's about being engaged. It's about caring what happens to the world around you. Do you even vote?" The audience gasps again. That question came out of nowhere. Dylan stares at her for a long moment. He says, "That's none of your business." Joyce smirks. She says, "So that's a no. You don't vote." The great Bob Dylan, the voice of a generation, can't even be bothered to participate in democracy. Dylan's hands are shaking now just slightly. He says, I've participated in democracy more than you'll ever know. I've given people a voice when they didn't have one. I've shined a light on injustice when everyone else was looking away. What have you done besides yell at people on television? Joy's voice gets louder. She says, I've used my platform to hold people accountable, to ask tough questions, to fight for what's right. You hide behind your guitar and pretend you're too artistic to care. Dylan takes a step toward the edge of the set. He says, I care. I've always cared, but I care in my own way, on my own terms. I don't need your approval, and I don't need your permission to live my life the way I see fit. Alyssa finally speaks, her voice shaky. She says, I think we need to take a break. Can we take a break? But Joy keeps going. She says, no, I want to finish this. Bob, you came on this show. You agreed to be here, and now you're acting like we're attacking you. All we're doing is asking you to have a conversation like an adult. Dylan turns back to face her fully. He says, an adult conversation doesn't involve being ambushed with accusations and moral judgments. An adult conversation involves respect. Something you clearly don't have for me or anyone else who doesn't think exactly like you do. Joy's voice rises even higher. She says, I have plenty of respect for people who deserve it. But you come in here with your attitude, acting like you're too good for this show. Too good to answer basic questions about your beliefs and your values. That's not respect. That's arrogance. Dylan's laugh is bitter. He says, my beliefs and values are in every song I've ever written. If you can't figure that out by now, then you're not listening. And maybe that's the real problem. Here, nobody listens anymore. Everyone just waits for their turn to talk. Joy points at him. She says, don't you dare lecture me about listening. I've been listening to you dodge and weave for the past 15 minutes. You haven't said one genuine thing since you sat down. Dylan's voice gets cold. He says, everything I've said has been genuine. You just don't like it because it doesn't fit your narrative. You want me to be some kind of political puppet, some symbol you can use to make your points. I'm not that. I never was. Whoopi stands up now, trying to physically get between them, even though there's a table in the way. She says, all right, this is getting out of hand. Bob, Joy, can we please just take a breath here? But Joy waves her off. She says, no, Whoopi. I'm tired of watching people come on this show and disrespect what we do. We work hard to create a space for important conversations, and he's treating it like a joke. Dylan shakes his head slowly. He says, I'm not treating anything like a joke. I'm treating it exactly like what it is, a circus. You ask questions you already know the answers to. You create conflict for ratings. You don't care about truth. You care about drama. And I'm done being part of it. Joy's face is flushed. She says, how dare you? How dare you come into our house and insult us like this? If you didn't want to be here, you shouldn't have agreed to come. Dylan starts to unhook his microphone. He says, you're right. I shouldn't have come. That's on me. I thought maybe things would be different, but they're not. It's the same game it's always been. You ask, I answer. You twist it into whatever you want it to be. I'm too old for this. Sarah Haynes, who's been quiet this whole time, finally says something. Her voice is almost pleading. She says, Bob, please. We really do admire your work. Can't we just start over? Talk about the album. Dylan looks at her with something like pity. He says, the album is called Rough and Rowdy Ways. It's about time and mortality and trying to make sense of a world that's spinning faster than anyone can keep up with. It's about being old and still having things to say even when nobody wants to hear them anymore. There, that's your soundbite. Joy isn't done. She says, this is unbelievable. You're acting like a child. A spoiled, entitled child who can't handle being challenged. Dylan stops unhooking his microphone and looks directly at her. He says, I've been challenged my entire life by critics, by fans, by politicians, by people who thought they knew better than me what I should say and how I should say it. I've handled all of it, but I don't have to handle disrespect. Not at this point in my life. Joy throws her hands up. She says, disrespect? I've been nothing but professional. You're the one who came in here with an attitude from the very beginning. Dylan's voice is quiet again, almost sad. He says, if asking real questions and refusing to play along is having an attitude, then yeah, I guess I do. But I call it being authentic. Something this show wouldn't recognize if it walked right through that door. That does it. Joy looks off camera to the producers. She says, are we seriously going to let him stand here and insult us? Is anyone going to do something about this? Sunny tries one more time. She says, Joy, maybe we should just let him go. This clearly isn't working. But Joy shakes her head. She says, No, he doesn't get to come on this show, disrespect all of us, and then just walk away like nothing happened. She looks at Dylan and says, You need to apologize right now. Dylan actually laughs at that. He says, Apologize for what? For being honest. For not kissing your ring. I've got nothing to apologize for. Joy's voice is shaking with anger now. She says, Then you need to leave right now. We don't need you here. This show has been on for decades and will be on for decades more. You're just a guest. A guest who's overstayed his welcome. Dylan nods slowly. He says, Fair enough. I'll leave. But let me say one more thing before I go. You all sit up here every day judging people, deciding who's good and who's bad, who's right and who's wrong. But you never look in the mirror. You never ask yourselves the hard questions. That's the difference between us. I've spent my whole life questioning everything, including myself. You've spent your whole life pretending you have all the answers. Joy stands up straighter. She says, Get him out of here. Somebody get him off my set now. 2 stage managers appear from the wings. They're not grabbing Dylan or anything dramatic like that, but they're clearly there to escort him out. Dylan holds up his hand. He says, I'm going. I'm going. Don't worry. He looks at the audience one last time and says, Thanks for having me, folks. Sorry you had to see this. As he starts to walk off, Joy can't resist one final shot. She says, And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what happens when ego gets in the way of common decency. Bob Dylan, everyone, a legend who forgot how to be a human being. Dylan stops at the edge of the set without turning around. And he says, I never forgot how to be a human being. That's why I'm leaving. And then he's gone. The camera stays on Joy and the other hosts. Whoopi looks exhausted. Sunny looks shocked. Sarah looks like she might cry. Alyssa just stares at the empty space where Dylan was sitting. Joy sits back down trying to compose herself, but you can see her hands are shaking. Joy looks into the camera and says, We'll be right back after this break. Clearly, some people can't handle a real conversation. But as they cut to commercial, you can see in her face that she knows this didn't go the way she wanted it to. Nobody won this argument. It was just messy and uncomfortable and real in a way that daytime television almost never is. So, what do you think? Was Bob Dylan out of line, or was Joy pushing too hard? Did he deserve to get kicked off, or should she have backed down? Drop your comments below and let me know. And if you want to see more breakdowns like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button. What's the wildest interview moment you've ever seen on live television? Let me know in the comments.